it was very good. But for both performance reasons and concentration reasons, it makes sense that the pros pull back on the graphics. And I wonder, you know, the ones, especially like the Koreans and so forth, and the better Europeans, I wonder how many of them have custom builds in terms of what they're seeing on screen, as opposed to just pulling back on graphics to make it look like StarCraft 1, basically. You're playing StarCraft 2, but it looks like StarCraft 1 and being way less busy. StarCraft 2 is a beautiful game and has continued to be more beautiful over the last 13 years or so since it's been out. It's gorgeous to look at for the type of game that it is, but it can be very distracting when you're trying to do a million actions per second. And as Judas points out, animations can throw off your timing because they don't necessarily reflect the cooldown periods and so forth, and attack speeds on screen, refresh rate. Obviously, you can pump way up as you turn the settings down, and so I wasn't aware that most of the pros were looking at tuned down wireframes as I think of it. I wasn't really aware that the pros were all doing that while they were playing, but as soon as I saw it watching these games, it made total sense. These guys have played so many games, you know, looking at the actual beautiful StarCraft graphics. When it comes down to championship time, the last thing you want to do is get distracted, even for 2 seconds, by how beautiful the graphics are, and you need to be 100% focused on the mathematics of what's going on. It's the same way, even in Modern War in 2023, they still use physical models or very basic computer models often. So here's the intro into Game 4. Obviously, REYNOR will lose this one and the next one for the reverse sweep for OLIVEIRA. And here's the shoutcasters trying to get everybody into the game. How's the sound, Judas? It looks to me like I'm going into the red a little bit.
Fantastic. Just playing out of the best of from OLIVEIRA. I'm going to stick with that.
Perfectly fine.
REYNOR
Awesome.
Showing his
prowess, of course, so OLIVEIRA, of course, I'll post guys online, or if you follow me on social media, SW Lorecast, or on other social media, or just here, I'll post an article about how big a deal it was that OLIVEIRA won this tournament. Specifically by beating REYNOR and then two of the best living Korean players to win the final 3 rounds. How big it was for him, how big it was for China, well, I don't have Judas on the stream vocally. If you're following his text, you should watch him on stream chat on Twitch. The story about how OLIVEIRA, who is only 20 years old, but you can start competing fully when you're 16, about how he had been sort of just the guy who lost to the best players for years, but he finally got over the hump of doing that so many times that he became the best player, and he really took REYNOR, Hero, and Maru by surprise. And you can see in all 3, I urge you guys to watch this entire match, but also the Maru and Hero finals and semifinals matches, because in all cases, you can see that all those guys did not expect to lose to OLIVEIRA, let alone lose so definitively. But it didn't happen. You can see on their faces, especially the Koreans who are, you know, famously unemotive. They don't show a lot of emotion while playing StarCraft. You can see it on Hero's face, and you can see it on Maru's face, that they just can't believe what was going on. And you see it with REYNOR as these go on. In fact, it might have happened before this game, or maybe it happens after this game when OLIVEIRA wins, that REYNOR brings his trainer or buddy, or maybe he's just like a therapist or whatever. A lot of these guys, you know, you need therapy. Yeah, after these guys, he brings his buddy over, and you can see him, you know, really emoting and just looking confused, trying to figure out and talking through in the couple minutes break that they get, just talking through what the hell is going on. Why is this guy beating me? How can I turn it around? Didn't help, obviously. Man, I mean, if you look at the growth pods of the Zerg, especially for the hatchlings there, it's so gross. It's straight from the Matrix, that color scheme. But I love how detailed it is. I mean, the Zerg just get grosser and grosser with each version of StarCraft. You gotta love it. It used to just be cartoonish gross. Now it's really disgusting because of the detail. But it really adds to the differentiation of the three races.
Okay, so yeah, I don't think Spire necessarily, but again, if it does become obvious.
They just mentioned the Spire. One thing I was surprised about, and we'll mention maybe in the Scarlet game, whether she does or not, is there's not a whole lot of air units unless the games go really late, with the Zerg in particular. And as I was talking about with Judas the other day, Scarlet will just build Spires to just throw the other person off. I mean, she's also giving herself the option, as we'll see, she's giving herself the option to have air units, but the way that she, specifically shows certain buildings to her opponent based on what their radar and scouting sees and what she's hiding. She'll often show, and since she's known to be good at Mutalisks and airplay, if you've seen longer matches with her when she ends up having tons of brood lords and so forth, but a lot of times it's just to build 1 or even 0 air units and just throw the other side off. Judas said he brought Harstam in. Oh, was that Harstam who comes on screen with REYNOR between rounds here? I thought that was just REYNOR's buddy. I didn't get a good look at the guy's face. I figured it was just. Oh, okay. Okay. Harstam is great, but I believe isn't he a Protoss player, or am I losing my mind here? He's a good follow online and a really nice guy, it seems like, that a lot of them are friends with. Yeah, Protoss player. Which is super cool that the Zerg player would talk to a Protoss player who he's competing against, not in this match, but in general who he's competing against. It's cool that he would bring him in and talk to him, not only because he's a competing player, but because it's a Protoss player. You think he'd bring in a Zerg player because REYNOR's a Zerg player, or that he'd bring in a Terran player because OLIVEIRA's a Terran player. Nope, you just want someone you trust and who you've talked to before, and also someone who's played that person, who's played OLIVEIRA and is familiar with him. Maybe you can give him some tips. I've read and heard a whole bunch of cool stories about Scarlet, who's a darling that everyone loves and has a huge following. My buddy Judas here is a favorite, and she's quickly becoming my favorite, although goddamn do I love OLIVEIRA after watching these games and the games that are going on. The tips didn't work, clearly. Yeah, Harstam plus REYNOR's brain is not able to stop OLIVEIRA. Here's the defenders, which I talk constantly online when I play co-op. I hate them and I don't know how to use them properly, but watching these competitive games with the best Terran players, especially mid to late game, when you're trying to just capture territory, shut down workers and so forth, you can start seeing where the defenders start being very effective. I do want to point out that in all of the matches I've watched, which span the last 10 years, and especially the last few years, they always play the official StarCraft music. And I love it because you might say, oh, they play the official StarCraft music because it's, mandated that they have to. But I think it's just because it's an amazing music and we all love it and we all play with the music. And I don't know what the players are listening to. If they're listening to any of the sound effects, they probably aren't listening to music. They might be listening to sound effects. I don't know what the players are listening to because they're cut off from the rest of us with their noise-canceling earphones to reduce distractions and not cheat and so forth. But I never don't listen to the StarCraft soundtrack. And I played hundreds and hundreds of hours of StarCraft. Other games that I broadcasted a lot of hours of, like Destiny 2, I'll often put on my own music you know, because I'll Twitch it, but I won't save the feed, and so I don't get tagged. But like I'll listen to Assassin's Creed soundtrack while playing Destiny or something. I never listen to non-StarCraft music while playing StarCraft 2. I wish they would play the original StarCraft soundtrack as well as the new one because it's held up so well. When you play yourself, you can tell the game to play a mix of StarCraft 2 music and original StarCraft Brood War music, but it doesn't matter because especially the Legacy of the Void music, which is what plays most of the time, is so epic and so great. I love that both the players and the fans and the casters, I mean, no one would ever think to complain or even comment on the fact that it's StarCraft music all the time, as it should be. We're just watching here. You can see Oliveira now up. They're both almost maxed out on supply, but Oliveira is up a little bit on military units, which of course against Zerg is even more of a boost. The great shot there of the two of them with their mice and keyboards. Guys, I know you're tempted to buy a $150 mouse and a $300 keyboard, but I've researched this extensively, and the best StarCraft players basically use very cheap keyboards and very cheap mice, either wired or wireless. And I'm sure there are reasons for why they do that. I've also heard that they play at around 800 to 1000 DPI. Here we go. Coming down the ramp here, making a run. You got tanks, you got medevacs with tons of Marines. They're still both maxed out. REYNOR's got plenty of money, but the Terrans, with their siege tanks and the Liberators, their area control. Boom, here it comes. Beautiful Liberator play. If I could play Liberators like this, I for sure would use them more often. Yeah, she just said it. ZG just says domination. But, you know, once you get enough tanks and Liberators on the field, you can just slowly move, like the advance of the best armies in history. Just slowly move, take ground, kill the enemy, move a little bit forward. And they talk a lot about, not just in this match, but in the following semifinals and finals, they talk about Oliveira's patience. You know, there's a bunch of games where he's already basically won or is on his way to winning, like here, where he could do a super fast push. And sometimes he will do a super fast push at the end to just end it. But sometimes, right, but he has one Liberator over that one hatchery, just picking off workers. REYNOR's down to 62 workers, and you know, when a game now is over 10 minutes and all the map has mostly been taken, the controlling area, the Zerg basically have to use the creep, which Scarlet is considered the best or one of the best in the world at building and maintaining and expanding creep. For the Terrans, it's about moving those tanks and Liberators out further and further, because once you have a certain, once you get over a certain threshold of siege tanks and Liberators covering area with their, 13 range or whatever it is, guarded by Marines, you can, as you saw there, you can pick off one or two at a time. When you're playing against the Liberator and siege tank thing, but it's very, very hard to push back a, let's see, Oliveira's at 88 in terms of his military supply. Very, very hard with all those siege tanks and Liberators, especially with squishier units like a lot of the Zerg that REYNOR's using. Really hard to move on that. You need to do some sneaky stuff, which Scarlet is so great at. It's part of why Scarlet attacks early, especially against non-Zerg players. But even late, she'll try and do Zergling drops into her opponent's bases, even if she's losing or if she's winning. She'll use basic units and surprise drops, because as the Zerg, if you're not gonna try and burrow move or whatever, which only the roaches and one or two units can do, move all burrowed, so no one really burrows. Plus detection, you have to do surprise stuff. But if you're looking at non-surprise stuff on the board, then the slow Terran push of, right, as they said, it's Ling, Roach, Ravager, very kind of standard for a lot of Zerg players. Here comes some Marauders, which I love, just to soak up some damage, and against the Roaches who are armored. You know, I mean, OLIVEIRA could have made a number of points in the last 5 minutes. OLIVEIRA could have made pushes to just end this game, but he knows that he hasn't been totally dominating up until about now, and so he's been taking his time in terms of, you see the siege tank staying in siege mode, moving slowly forward. When you look at the mini-map in the bottom left of your screen, you can see that while the creep is spread pretty far, the Terrans in blue have a pretty strong hold on over a third of the map. And so, as long as you can keep those Marines coming and stimming them, using the Liberators and the siege tanks to hold terrain, and to hold ground for more than a couple seconds or even a couple minutes for long stretches of the game, you basically remove that area as a possibility for your opponent to even challenge you, even if they outnumber you. And especially with Zerg units, if you're using more basic Zerg units in large numbers, then large number of siege tanks and Liberators in defensive and siege mode are going to take them down. This game is going longer than I remembered. I think it's partially because REYNOR has got more conservative after almost losing game 2 and losing game 3 badly. So REYNOR's been playing more long game macro, and OLIVEIRA as the Terran player is certainly not gonna. Here it comes. So in the bottom right there, you can see that there's a small Zerg attack on one of the base, but the bigger attack here, there's a bunch of Roaches. And they're just mostly going down. I mean, they're picking off a tank or a Liberator here and there. But OLIVEIRA is now about to hit 100 military units to 82 Zerg units. Oh, she just popped out, REYNOR just popped out a whole bunch. You can see the income advantage. And REYNOR has had an income advantage almost this whole game, but he doesn't know where to spend the money or how to spend it. OLIVEIRA always seems to know how to spend the money, what to spend it on and when. He doesn't mind losing a siege tank because he took out 20 units there with a siege tank and a bunch of Marines. I also want to point out OLIVEIRA's use of ghosts in the late game to take out large bio units like Ultralisks and Lurkers and Vipers and so forth is awesome. I'm a huge fan of the ghosts. And I'm glad that they're not only in the meta, but used by the best players in late game, as they were intended to. Here it comes. Boom, boom. You can hear choo-choo-choo if you can hear the sound effects. You can hear the little snipes. Ultras. Every time he sends the Ultras in, all of a sudden the ghosts come out. Right, Ultra goes down. Baneling's going after the ghost, but his splits are so good. And the Banelings are taking out a ghost here, a ghost there, but it's, you know, as ZG and the other host points out, killing a ghost here and a ghost there, you know, even if you don't have to use a ton of Banelings, it's just not efficient. It's a waste of time and resources. And OLIVEIRA has really a large number of ghosts relatively and is so great at splitting them, which just means separating the groups so that they're not all clumped up when the Baneling, you know, death ball comes to try and murder them all. So he's only losing 1 or 2 ghosts at a time and taking out tons of Zerg. And really there's not a lot Zerg can do against ghosts with their special bio snipe attack, which I'm forgetting the name of, because Zerg's all bio. That's the whole point of them being Zerg. I mean, some are armored, some are massive, some are small, some are light. They have different classes, but all Zerg are living beings. They don't have tanks or carriers, and so the ghosts' special snipe power against right, Banelings counter ghosts, as Judas points out, but as we've seen here over the past few minutes, there's been enough tanks, Marines, Marauders, and Medevacs to deal with them, and then, boom, you just saw 2 very bloody pops of Ultralisks by the ghosts, You can see REYNOR starting to move frantically there on your screen. OLIVEIRA is ice calm. Look at the difference there, though. REYNOR's lost 30,000 minerals worth of military units to 18,000 for OLIVEIRA. So REYNOR's lost almost twice as many units from just a economic, financial standpoint than OLIVEIRA throughout the course of this game. So it's actually less close than it looks like. Even though REYNOR has a higher worker count by a lot and a ton of money, he just can't spend it fast enough to go up against what REYNOR has, what OLIVEIRA has set up. And now that he's got those ghosts, I'm gonna turn up my sound a little bit here. This is really exciting. We're definitely getting to Scarlet versus Bomber after this matchup, but I shouldn't have put on REYNOR versus OLIVEIRA because every time I put this on, I just want to watch it. It's so good. Here comes another rush. Tons of Zerg. They all go down. The big ones go down. The Banelings are mostly going down. Look at that split of the ghosts. Yeah, amazing split of the ghosts. There were so many Banelings heading towards that group of ghosts, and only a couple go down. And OLIVEIRA stays at 90 military supply. Sure, Zergs are going to lose tons of units, as Judas points out. There's no doubt about it, but it's, if you watch when, okay, so here come Ultralisks. 3 Ultralisks. They must be scared of the ghosts. Yeah, he had an Ultralisk rush there, but maybe he's gotten scared of the ghosts. And you'll see in the final match 5, where OLIVEIRA closes it out, that it's once again the ghosts at the end of that game that prevent any final late game moves by REYNOR, which is super cool. You don't ever need to use nukes with ghosts. Just use them to take out bio in the late game. Right, another rush with a bunch of Zergs. You got Zergs, you got Vipers, you got Overlords, and they just keep retreating. Here's some desperate Zerg attack on the supply. They're going to take out one supply depot, get in, but OLIVEIRA is not really caring too much about it, because at this point you're trying to kill units, not necessarily bases. Zerg has 3/4 of the map, as Judas points out, but it does not matter. I do want to point out, though, they don't have 3/4 creep. Another ghost massacre of Ultralisks. I mean, REYNOR just gets increasingly scared of using Ultralisks at this point in the game because the ghosts with their special biosnipe ability just take them down. Look at all those ghosts. Such a beautiful thing to see, like 16 ghosts just waiting for large Zerg bio units. That's how it was in the original, even before Brood War, but especially in Brood War. And I love that the ghosts remain not only viable, but a necessary, or at least very valuable late game Terran unit, especially against bio. I imagine Terran, Judas, as a question towards you, Terran versus Terran. I assume if one of the Terrans is still using a lot of Marines late game, the other one will go to Ghosts to try and take out Marines, right? Are Ghosts good against Marines in large numbers? Right, so there's another one where he goes after the base, he doesn't get the command center, REYNOR that is, and then he has to retreat a whole bunch of his units. Okay, so Ghosts are still being used mainly to take down large bio units, and the only race that has a ton of large bio units, or really any large bio units, is of course the Zerg. That's the whole point of the Zerg. And so Ghost as a late game against large Zerg bio seems to be the way to go. Otherwise, yeah, I didn't remember having seen the Ghosts much until I watched this match, Judas. So, and I was surprised that they were being used. I thought OLIVEIRA was being cocky, but he really knows how to use them at the right time, and he knows how to spread them out and split them to avoid those Baneling rushes. Judas's Ghosts are also for EMP. Yeah, you use the EMP versus Toss and Terrans. I'd forgotten, honestly, because I never play Terran when I play multiplayer, other than Nova and co-op, but regular multiplayer, or generally I don't play Terran. So I always mix up what powers Ghosts have in single player and co-op versus what they have in straight up versus. play here, but EMP against high energy Terran units and pretty much all Protoss units who are all shielded and a lot rely on energy. It would make sense that you use Ghosts against them. Look at this Ghost Rush. Now he's sending out the Ghosts against the base. Tons of Ghosts, some Fire Bats, and this is also another thing is, you know, Fire Bats are way out of fashion. You rarely see a lot of Fire Bats, if any, even against Zerg in versus multiplay or any StarCraft, because they just go down so quickly and they're hard to control. They rush forward when you don't want them to. But there's a number of games that Oliveira in this series throughout this tournament where he brings in those blue flame upgraded Fire Bats and of course the Hellions, especially against the Zerg late game. Earlier in the game, you use that, of course, you use the flame-throwing units against the worker lines, and later in the game, he's just using them straight up to help supplement everything else he's got going on. Yep, there are those blue flame Fire Bats. Very cool unit. Here comes the defenders, coming back to be defensive. Yeah, the more I watch all of this, the more I understand why defenders are valuable in versus play. I still can't see it in co-op. With as much as I play Nova, I almost never use defenders. But with versus play, where you're trying to control terrain over large periods of time, I can totally see it. Judas points out that REYNOR is actually causing Oliveira to use more Liberators than maybe he normally would even. I mean, he clearly is excellent at using Liberators, so he must use them a decent amount of time in play, but he's using a lot of Liberators in this series against REYNOR because REYNOR keeps using tons of Zerglings even late game, and with enough Liberators in Defender mode against weak ground units, I mean, just forget about it. They are super powerful, especially upgraded. I believe Oliveira is fully upgraded. He has one upgrade that's at 2, but all of his other upgrades are at a full 3, and Liberator's ground attack, I believe, go up 5 for every weapons upgrade. You get an additional 5 ground damage for Liberators. So fully upgraded Liberators get an extra 15 damage per attack. Is unbelievably powerful and worth the armory upgrades. The weapon upgrades in the armory is worth it just for the Liberators as a Terran player. Oh, Judah, right, yeah, he's using Hellbats because of all the Zerglings. Right, but you don't use Hellbats early in the game. But now that he's got all the upgrades and he's got the infrastructure of tanks and Liberators and so forth kind of protecting them, you can feel a little bit better about throwing Fire Bats out there. Plus you've got money to spend. Now the economics thing has gone completely the other way. Oliveira is really dominating. He's got 150 military units as a Terran against 100 versus REYNOR. He's got all the money. He's got all the upgrades. As I pointed out 15 minutes ago during this game, Oliveira was already winning, but now there's no question about it. Here's one last desperate rush. Now he's got 12 ghosts. He's got like 18 ghosts. So, I mean, trying to get, you know, even 8 Ultralisks anywhere near that base is just... So he's got the Fire Bats to take on the Zerglings. Now he's throwing out Thors. I mean, you know once the Thors start coming out slowly en masse that it's all over. I'm actually surprised that REYNOR doesn't GG and end right here. Maybe he does. But once you start throwing Thors out, to me Thors are completely just like a fashion unit. You know, they look so big and powerful, but they're so big and expensive. In this fast-moving game like this, you really, it's just not worth the money. But you know when you start seeing Thor's late game in any game. Look at this defender play. He gets 3 defenders. And he only keeps them there for a couple seconds, but it forces the workers to move. It forces the other bio units to move. Now he's using the Liberators straight up as air units against the Broodlords. REYNOR sitting back in his chair, and there he goes. GG.